Hey guys, welcome to 6.2 Adding Integers Flipped Classroom. So thank you for listening to my lovely voice outside of class. Tonight I want to teach you a little bit more about adding integers. So the first thing that I want you to write down, I want you to actually pull out your red pen and write this down. You're going to want to know the definition of absolute value. The absolute value is the distance between 0 and a number on a number line. Okay, so go ahead and put that in red pen in your notes. Next up, I want you to write down that the absolute value of a number is never going to be negative. Okay, so as you can see right here, the absolute value of A is going to be written just like this. It's got two little lines going up and down around the number. So you can see right here, the first thing that it's asking you is the absolute value of -3. Once again, the definition is saying it's the distance between 0 and a number on a number line. So you can see right here is -3, and we're trying to figure out how many spaces away from 0 it is. So you can simply count, it's 1, 2, 3 spaces from 0. So the absolute value of -3 is going to be 3. So in that blank right there next to it, just put 3 and box it in. Next up, you've got the absolute value of 2. Once again, you're trying to figure out the distance between the number 2 and 0 on a number line. So here's the number 2. You can simply see, okay, it is 2 spots away from 0. So the absolute value of 2 is going to be 2. I want you to look at the next one on your own. Problem C, the absolute value, once again, remember whenever it has those lines coming up and down right there, that means absolute value. So the absolute value of -5. How many spaces away is -5 from a 0? Okay, go ahead and write the answer down. As you can see here, it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away from 0. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. A simple way of figuring out what the absolute value of something is, it's simply going to be the number there. And once again, as I said, it can never be negative. You wrote that down in red. It can never be negative. So it's just going to be whatever the number is, but without the negative sign. So continuing on in your notes, I want you to go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to find the absolute value of A, B, and C on that next section of your notes. Okay, hopefully you paused it, but you can see 8 is exactly 8 numbers away from 0. -7 is going to be 7 numbers away from 0. And 0 is obviously 0 numbers away from 0 because it's right there on the 0, okay? So hopefully you got each of those correct. We've talked a little bit about the rules for adding integers in class, and I know that a lot of you guys learned it last year for a brief time in 6th grade too. These rules are very important. They're something that you definitely need to memorize. So I want you to pull out your red pen to fill in these blanks for this slide right here because it's very important to remember. Whenever you're adding an integer, if you ever have the same sign, you will always add the numbers and keep the sign. Okay, so if you remember in class we sang a little song about this, which you'll get to sing again tomorrow. I know you're super excited about. But anyway, so remember, same sign, add the numbers, keep the sign. Put that in your notes in a red pen, please. Next up, if you ever have a different sign, you will always, every single time, subtract the numbers and then take the sign of the larger number. So please go ahead and put that in your notes with your red pen also. For the next part of your notes, I also want you to put this in your red pen. This is something you've got to remember and something that I think a lot of you guys are a little bit confused on just from what we talked about in class already. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. Okay, so once again, remember, if you see the number 5, even though there's no number there or no sign in front of it, we always know it's going to be a positive. Whenever you see something that might say -4, this right here is that sign that's directly in front of that number. So be careful. A lot of you guys are thinking whenever you see 7 minus 4, you think, oh, those are both positive numbers. But no, this right here is a positive number because there's nothing in front of it, so it would be +7. However, if you remember right there that you just wrote in red, every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. This right here says -4, although you might think it says -4. If you're taking something away, that is a negative thing, okay? If you owe somebody money, They are subtracting money. That means it's a negative thing, not a positive thing. So although you might think that you are subtracting a positive number, this is a negative number. It's -4. Okay, so once again, remember, every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. So we're going to go ahead and do a few examples right now. It's asking us to find the sum here. So the first thing you got to do is see if you have the same sign or if you have the different sign. So I've got -3 plus -12. Clearly you can look at that and see this is a negative number and this is a negative number. So that would be the same sign. Remember, our rule says same sign, add the numbers, and keep the sign. So if I add the numbers together, I've got 3 and 12. 3 plus 12 is what, guys? 15, okay? So you add the numbers and then you have to keep the sign. So your answer would be -15. Let's go over here to problem B. -7 plus 9. Remember, every number has a sign and that sign is directly in front of that number. Here I can see that is a negative sign. Directly in front of that number, that is a positive sign. So clearly you can tell by looking at these are two different signs. So remember, whenever you have different signs, you subtract the numbers and take the sign of the bigger number. Remember, whenever you subtract numbers, take the biggest number first. So we're going to take 9 minus 7. What's 9 minus 7? 2. Now you take the sign of whatever the bigger number is. The bigger number there was a 9. And since 9 was positive, this will also be positive. You can put +2 there, or you can just leave it as a basic plain number 2. Let's go to problem C. -10 plus 7. Remember, look at the signs first. Here, directly in front of it, that's a negative. Directly in front of the 7, that's a positive. So this should be very obvious to you that those are different signs. Remember the rule, different signs, subtract the numbers, and take the sign of the bigger number. So here my bigger number is 10, so I'm going to do 10 minus 7. 10 minus 7 is 3. Now you have to take the sign of the bigger number. Out of these, which number is bigger, 10 or 7? The 10 is bigger, and as you can see there, the 10 is negative, which means my answer has to be a -3. For this next one, problem D, I want you to look over here and pull out your red pen, and I want you to write something in the notes right there off to the side. I've got a little box there that says the sum of an integer, which is a positive or a negative number, and its opposite is always going to equal 0. We can still use our same rules that we've had before. Every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of the number. So this is a negative, and this is a positive. Those are obviously different signs. Anytime you have a different sign, you're going to subtract the numbers and take the sign of the larger number. So let's just subtract. It's the same exact thing. 4 minus 4 is 0. And if you remember, we've talked about before, 0 is never going to be positive or negative. It's simply just 0. All right, this next example, problem E, is a little bit longer than the other ones, but we're going to use the same exact rule. It's saying 12 plus -3 plus 13 plus -5. There's a couple different ways that you could do this. You could rearrange the numbers. You could put all the positives together. You could put all the negatives together. I'm going to show you one way that you just kind of work from left to right. So let's work at this first part right here. 12 plus -3. You can see in front of the 12 there's no sign, which means it's positive. Remember, every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. So this one right here, directly in front of the 3, is a negative. So you can see here that you've got two opposite signs. Remember, whenever you have different signs, you're going to subtract the numbers and take the sign of the larger number. So here what I'm going to do is 12 minus 3, which is what? 9. Now take the sign of the larger number. Which number was larger, the 12 or the 3? The 12 was. The 12 was positive, so this is going to be a positive 9. Now I am simply going to bring down all of this with the signs directly down. So bringing down my plus sign, 13, plus, and -5. Now we're simply going to once again work from left to right. So here's my next part that I've got, 9 plus 13. Every number has a sign. That sign's directly in front of that number. As I'm looking at that, it's very obvious to see they're both positives. So 9 plus 13 is going to be 21, and then you simply bring down all this other part that you have not used yet. So bring down your plus and your -5. Once again, every number has a sign. That sign's directly in front of that number. There is no sign there, so that's automatically, we know, is a positive, and this one right here is a negative. So I have different signs. Remember the rule, different signs, subtract the numbers and take the sign of the larger number. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract the numbers 21 minus 5 equals 17, and let's take the sign of the larger number, which was a positive. So my answer is going to be positive 17. Remember, you can write the positive in front of it, but you do not have to. The next part is asking us to copy and complete this statement using less than, greater than, or equal to. The main thing you got to do here is just figure out what the values are. So 6 is obviously just plain old 6, and then the absolute value, because remember those lines right there mean absolute value, the absolute value of negative 7 is 7 because it's 7 places away from 0. So we can clearly tell here that 6 is less than 7, which means 6 is less than the absolute value of negative 7. Pause the video and try to do the next 3 on your own. Alright, so you know the absolute value of negative 9 is 9, and the absolute value of negative 7 is 7, and we can tell 9 is greater than 7, so the absolute value of negative 9 is greater than the absolute value of negative 7. For problem C, it says 5, and then you're trying to compare it to the absolute value of negative 5. So remember, you're just going to bring the 5 down, and the absolute value of negative 5 is going to be 5. You can tell that they equal each other. For the final example, you'll see that there's actually no work that you have to do. It already says negative 16 and negative 3. Now you got to be careful with negative numbers. Think of it like dollars. Would you rather have negative $16 or negative $3? When you see that, you know that the negative 3 is bigger than negative 16. So you have from left to right, negative 16 is less than negative 3. So finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give you these 5 practice problems that I want you to work on. Bring them to class tomorrow and we'll check them. But just remember, the main thing that you've got to know is every number has a sign, and that sign is directly in front of that number. And then just remember, same sign, add the numbers, keep the sign. Different signs, subtract the numbers, and always take the sign of the larger number. Okay, so go ahead and do these 5 on your own. Thank you for listening, and I will see you tomorrow.